Welcome back to the Roy Works channel. In today's video, we are continuing work at Shane's house, his remodel. During the week this week, I was working at a job where they were removing a lot of the old pots from a heating system. If you follow me on Instagram, you can see the retrofit heating system that we ended up putting into this house. But the byproduct of doing that job is there was a lot of tear out, a lot of pots that weren't going to be reused, and they're new enough where we could actually reuse them at Shane's property here. Because what's good about it, if there's ever a problem, we can work together and we can replace those pots either with new pots or pots in good shape, or the remainder of whatever we have here that we don't use on this installation we'll keep as backup pots. Because during this time, the inflationary cost for you buying this stuff brand new is astronomical. Stuff has gone up so expensive. So to be able to keep within the budget of doing this project, sometimes you have to compromise and use used pots that are still in really good shape. That might be a wise decision for anybody doing a remodel that is willing to put up with possibly a little aggravation using old pots, but Shane and I both came to the conclusion that it would definitely be well worth it. So today what we're doing is actually doing the gas piping and doing the final steel connections to the boiler. In this video, I'm going to give you a couple of quick tips on threading and sealing in threaded connections. So let's get to it. So I'm going to start tying in the feed and returns to the main manifold. This has a primary and a secondary loop system. I can go into that a little bit more as the system gets completed when we actually do the fill up. But let's go down and see how Shane's doing on the gas piping. So Shane, how are you doing on the gas?
I'm starting to run the gas piping down here. And so I started with putting all these clips up. And this is basically my middle section. So the boiler is going to be on this end. The connection to the tank's going to be on this end. And then I have all the gas going to the kitchen, all rode right here. So I have the clips run first, full lengths put up so I don't have to make any small connections. And now I'm prepping to join all these together with the smaller pieces.
So you're going to make that connection first?
I'll make this connection first. Bring it up to this here.
Yep.
The smaller pieces. And I'll be running it out to the tank this end. Yep. And connecting it to the boiler on that end.
Okay, good. So you're starting in that center location so you can actually branch out and go either direction to make the final connections to each appliances?
Exactly.
All right, awesome. So you have, all right, looks good. You have all that ran all the way over here, and that run right there is running over to the gas stove, and you ran them all, which looks really good. You ran them all parallel to all the other pipes. Excellent. So Shane, where did you get your measurement from to make sure all those were parallel? Like what was the reference point that you used?
I started with this joist here, assuming that it's gonna start off the wall a little bit. Yep. With this mark here. And then I took the side of this, or I measured from the edge of my clip where I'm putting the screw in to the edge of the pipe here, which I'm assuming this is all parallel.
Yeah.
And to keep it all running parallel, I'm measuring off of there. And then in between, we're gonna have eventually water pipes going through.
So how did you know, like running that first pipe, where did you get your measurement from to make sure, because if you had nothing to measure to, that could be all wavy going all the way down. So what did you end up using as a parallel to reference?
My first measurement was the edge of the house over here. So I assume that this is straight.
Oh, okay.
And then measured from there to the center of my first pipe.
Yeah.
And that's how I got that one pretty much straight. And then assuming that's straight, all of these other pipes are based off of this first pipe.
Oh, okay. So you used, I see, so you used that sill that you know is pretty much perpendicular to these joists, so it should be, for the most part.
Should be straight.
Yeah, it should be, you know, kind of just assuming that it would be, because it looks like it is. And so you got a measurement to this point here, off that, and you use that as a reference all the way down for your first pipe. And then you went off of those for the rest of them?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, looks good. All right, so we're gonna continue doing the gas for that. I don't think they use the same theory for this old water piping.
No. You see where it gets really wonky at the end?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll be redoing all that eventually. So Shane, this is a cool table you got.
$50 at the Lawrence Mill.
I wonder what that was. Like a packing, like a shipping thing?
Yeah, maybe it's called like an industrial skid.
How's that? All right, guys, just to give you a quick tip on threading pipe and also the differences between threads on pipe that has to be tightened into a fitting and a normal thread. You might say, why is there a difference? A thread's a thread, right? Well, they actually aren't. A lot of you might already know this, but for anybody that don't know it, this might be a good little bit of information. So the difference between, let's say, this type of thread that would be on any bolt or fastener, this is actually threaded rod. The threads that are on, let's say, for gas piping or gas lines or air lines, these have actually a taper to them. So the thread goes from a larger diameter around the bottom here, and they go to a smaller diameter as it gets closer to the end of the pipe. And the dies you use to do this threading typically come like this here, and the teeth actually have that taper built in. the diameter of the teeth on the outer edge is smaller than the diameter of the teeth on the inside. So it actually is kind of like a cone shape. It goes from small at the top and gets bigger as it goes down. And why that is, if you didn't have it smaller, it would be next to impossible to get a fitting started on a piece of pipe. So if this was the same size all the way down, you wouldn't be able to even get this fitting on here. But what it does, the inside of the fitting actually has that same taper in it, so they match up really good as you tighten it up. But to make it so it's a seal, as you tighten this up, it gets harder and harder to spin it on. And why that is because the two cone shaped threads are meeting up in there. The inside pipe is growing compared to the fitting. So as it tightens up, it actually causes a wedge effect, and the pipe gets forced against the inside of the fitting. So it ends up making a good seal. But to aid in that seal and help lubricate it as you tighten it, you use this stuff called pipe dope or pipe sealant. With steel pipe, you usually use a petroleum-based compound because you use oil with this, and you want something that's going to be compatible with anything that's on that. So we use this. So for cutting and threading pipe, we typically use the Rigid 300, which is a really powerful unit. It will do up to 2-inch pipe. It works really well. You don't necessarily need to use this. There's a lot of handheld tools that will do just as good, but definitely for a smaller diameter. So on this case here, we're going to be doing 1-inch pipe and threading using a handheld die. So when you're threading, you always want to have oil on hand and lubricate it with oil. The oil both lubricates the threads and also cools the steel so it don't get heated and become tempered. Because when it gets tempered, it'll stop breaking the threads. So you want to use plenty of oil. Usually we have a pump, hand pump, to be able to do this, but it actually broke today. So I'm just going to use a cup with some oil in it and just keep it lubricated. Now it's very important when you thread a pipe like this, you don't want to put too many threads on it, because what will happen, the small part of the pipe or a smaller diameter of the thread will protrude too far, and if that happens, when you go to tighten it onto a fitting, let's say you're going to be tightening it into a 1-inch 90, and let's say I made the threads too long. Well, what will happen is the end of the pipe, it'll seem like it's tight because the end of the pipe will get forced into the bottom of the fitting. So it'll go too far into the fitting and it'll appear to be tight because you won't be able to spin it anymore. But actually what is happening is it's hitting the back of the pipe and not tightening around the diameter here. The wide part of the thread, the part that's a larger diameter, isn't going to seat against here. So you'll get a leak. That's a lot of beginners that I train. They do that by accident because they naturally think the more threads the better, the farther that it goes in, but it don't work that way. So it ends up creating a leak. So the best using a threader like this, the furthest you want to go in onto the pipe is right to the end of the dies. like right where that die is, you want to stop right there, because these are already designated sizes for the threads. So if you go by that guideline, that definitely helps you. Now, when you're ready to take this apart, this was in the threading position with this up. You just spin that around, you put the machine in reverse. See, that's a perfect thread. There's no chips. There's nothing wrong with it. It has the perfect taper. I don't know if you can see that. It's very slight, but there is a taper here. Another tip, when you're adding the sealant, a lot of people I see when they're first starting to put pipe sealant on, even some people that have done this for a long time, they'll load this up with a ton of pipe sealant. And in reality, you really don't need that much. Most fittings will only tighten on to about 3/4 of the threads. So right about here, the fitting typically stops. So it's not necessary to cover all these threads. You really want to actually only do 3/4 of them. And what you try to do is just fill in the thread. It don't have to be globbed on like this. You really don't want to do that, and I'll show you in a minute why. You just want to just fill the threads. And the important thing is you want the pipe sealant to go all the way around in an equal amount. If you're having a hard time by wiping it that way and you're not able to get it to stay in the threads, you can go in a diagonal position like this, and that will fill them in really nice. But you do want to make sure it gets all the way around. Now, if you put too much on, what will happen is as you tighten it into the fitting, it'll actually glob on the inside like this. And that will actually restrict any flow that you're trying to get into the pipe. It's going to do that a little bit anyway, but you really don't want it to do it a lot, because it'll restrict the flow going through there considerably. So I hope these little tips help anybody that does this. Like I always say, if you're in an area that requires a license to do this work, always get a professional to do it. Somebody that's licensed and knows how to do this. But if you're going to do something like this for airlines in your garage, or anything, any projects, have at it, especially like airlines, because, you're not dealing with gases that can explode or asphyxiation. That's easy for you to say. But guys, I'm really sorry about my voice. I'm still battling laryngitis and just trying to get through it. But yeah, so that's basically, I know some of you already know how to do all this stuff, but if there's anybody there that can get anything out of this, I'm glad to show you. And if you have any other questions, any other plumbing questions or anything, leave them in the comment, and I'll try to address them. Especially during this project, we're going to be exposed to a lot of different processes in plumbing and heating and carpentry and all different things. We're going to be doing all types of things at Shane's house, and I'm glad to share any of it with all of you. All right, Shane, moment of truth. That's a good sign. So it's going to be 3 psi for at least 10 minutes.
That was on purpose.